Our scripture lesson today is found in the 15th chapter of the Gospel of Luke, starting with the 11th verse. But we will be telling this story from the vantage point of 2020. If Jesus were here today and telling this parable, perhaps it would sound like this. A man had two sons. The younger one was very attached to his television. And when he would go out and do the work on the farm, cultivating the corn and feeding the cattle, he couldn't get away from what he was watching on television. This man was so radiant. I mean, he was so happy all the time. One had to wonder why he was so happy. Perhaps it was the cigarette that he held within his hand. Perhaps it was in that bottle of vodka that he was holding in the other hand. But he would laugh and laugh and laugh. And there were others on the program with him, other women. Perhaps he was so happy because of those women there too. And so he would go out to do his work, but he couldn't let go of this hero of his that he watched as often as he could. Oh, if he could just be as happy as them. Perhaps sometime he could meet them and he could imagine meeting them. They'd put his arm around him. They would be laughing. He would show him many things. Ah, yes, that's life. This business of cultivating the corn and feeding the pigs and so on, that's nothing. And his home life, I mean, Dad had all kinds of ideas, but that's not happiness. I want that happiness. And so one day, as he kept building this and building this in his mind, he finally decided he had to do something about it. So he went to his father and he said, Dad, give me my share of the estate now. And then I can go and do something with it. And his father thought for a while and finally said, Son, give me a couple of days. I'll see whether I can do it. And so he gathered up money, equaling his share of the estate. Now he was powerful. He took his money, went to the closest airport, got on an airplane and bought a ticket to Los Angeles, to Hollywood. That's where this guy lives. If he could just meet him, he would know he could pick up all of this happiness. And so he went to Hollywood. He was amazed at the many, many people there. Nobody seemed to care about him at all. They just walked on by. He finally found where his favorite man worked. So he went to that television company. He walked in. The person at the table met him and said, May I help you? He said, Yes, I've come to meet Mr. So-and-so. I watch his show all the time. I just came to meet him. She said, I'll see whether I can find him. So she called on the phone and she said, he's coming to meet you. He was expecting this vibrant person. But this man came out with his cigarette hanging out of his mouth. He said, hello, who are you? He said, well, I am so-and-so. I watch you all the time. I like your show. I'm glad to hear that. Good to meet you. Now you must excuse me because I'm busy. And he turns around and walks off. What a shock. What a shock. He wasn't happy like he thought he would be happy. Perhaps something's wrong. He didn't have his liquor and he did have a cigarette hanging out of his mouth, but he wasn't happy. He walked out, went back to his expensive hotel room, sat and thought, well, maybe I should try some of those things. So he tried the cigarettes. That didn't help. He tried the vodka and it didn't help. All left was depression. No, maybe it was the women. So he finally figured out how to contact a woman. Called on the telephone. He got an appointment. That must be what he senses. This is going to be great. He met the woman. She didn't seem to really take a special interest in him. She shared with him and then was more interested in the money. He wants the money. Wait a minute. Where's the joy? Where is this happiness I'm supposed to be getting? Oh, I must have the wrong woman. I'll try another one. And I'll try another one. Always the same thing. He was nothing, no meaning. Just give me the money. What's he after here? Something's not right. He tried drugs. He tried this. He tried that. Can't find that sense that he was after when he left home. Finally, he ran out of money, for the hotel room was tremendously expensive. Every one of these women were tremendously expensive. All the drugs were tremendously expensive. And there was nothing there. Now he had to get a job because he couldn't eat. He didn't have a place to live. But the television station, they weren't interested in hiring him. He didn't have any training. The police, they didn't want to have him with him because he wasn't trained. He couldn't get a job in the office because he wasn't trained. The only thing he could do was try to find a farmer. I found one. So he hired on, signed a contract, but it didn't include food and it didn't include lodging. When he came to do his job, the farmer sent him to the back fields where his big pig farm was. The stinking pig farm. He fed the pigs. He fed the pigs like he did at home. But he didn't have the food. And he didn't have a place to sleep. On the meager thing that he was being paid for, feeding the pigs, he couldn't make it. But where's this joy? Where's this happiness? I don't understand. He kept getting deeper and deeper until finally he came to the end. And he said to himself, you know what? My father has servants, and they eat better than I do now. And he treats them better. He was so hungry he could eat the food, even though it was rotten that he was feeding the pigs. He finally had to come to his senses and say, I'm going to go home. But the problem is, I've wasted all my father's stuff. Well, maybe I could say to him, my father, don't see me as a son. Just see me as one of your servants. I'll be most happy to serve you in any way. And so he finally had to come to that point of facing his father. But now he didn't have any money to fly home. So he had to hitchhike home. And as he hitchhiked home, he kept going over in his mind how he was going to approach his father. But he got within 15 miles from home and had to get off the bus at that point, or whoever was hauling him, got off the bus and started walking down this side road that would take him to his father's home. He was walking along, hating like everything to face his father, going over in his mind how he was going to face his father. He come over the little hill, and then he could see down ahead, there was his dad's farm. He was walking along, concentrating on how he was going to face his father, he would probably be very angry. Suddenly, as he looked down there, he saw two people coming toward him. They were running. They were running. He said, oh, that must be the neighbors out on their jogging. I wonder if I'll remember them. I'll say hello to them. But as he got closer, he was as shocked. One's my dad. And the other one, he's my dad's closest servant. And they were running. And he was thinking, how do I approach him now? How do I have to say this? But his dad just kept coming and kept coming. And instead of meeting and shaking his hand where he could say, hey, Dad, his dad came and hugged him. And he said, oh, my son, you were dead, now you are alive. You were lost and now you're found, oh, my son. Thank you for coming home. And he turned, the son was trying to get it out of his mouth. Dad, I want that. Dad wasn't hearing. He turned to the servant. He said, go and kill the calf, the fatted calf, and get the neighbors. We're going to have a tremendous homecoming. The servant turned around and ran home. His dad pulled him real close, and they walked together. So the father couldn't get done expressing how beautiful it was to have his son home. Meanwhile, everything was really revved up for the homecoming. And the elder son happened to come in from the fields. And he came in from the fields and he saw all this activity. And he saw one of the servants and he said, what's going on? What's going on? Why all this activity? He said, oh, haven't you heard? Your brother's home. You're going to have a homecoming, big homecoming. Your dad wants you to come. The son said, I'm not coming. I'm not going to come. The servant went and told the father. The father came out and said, son, your brother is home. He was dead, now he's alive. He was lost and now he's found. We must celebrate. His son said, Dad, I have obeyed you all the way, all my life. You've never given me even a goat to share with my friends. And here's this brother who went out and wasted his life with women, wine and song. And now you want me to come and celebrate what he's done? No way. No way. Count me out. Turned around and he walked away. His father went back to the party. This is the end of the story of the prodigal son. Perhaps it should be the prodigal sons. For if one would analyze the story, who is the main character? You say, well, that was the youngest son. Nay, he was not the main character. Well, was it the older son? Nay, he was not the main character either. For the main character was the father. It was a demonstration of how the Father God respects and loves that which is of himself. The boy was his son. It was a manifestation of himself. And so it didn't matter what the boy did. What mattered was he discovered himself and came home to become one with the Father. When you see and understand as you understand what Moria is saying, he said one must actually become the will of God. You have to have an ownership of God's will. It has to be what you are. He said too many people see the will of God as this thing and my will is another thing. But that is not what the story was about. There is no other will. There's only one will, for there's only one God. And if you are not owning the will of God within yourself, you are nothing. He got to Los Angeles, but he was nothing. It was all fake. You know, they talk about fake news. Well, this is fake living. It's not real. The only reality was in that will of God. When he was manifesting, the Father was manifesting, and the Son finally began to fall for what was happening. Yes, God does love. God is that inner being which makes all life worthy. The fulfillment, the peace, the joy, the happiness when you have that relationship with the will of God. You are the will of God. You are not obeying the will of God. You are not manifesting. You are it. This is the whole goal. This is what we're working with. And Moria is one of the greatest exemplars of that. And this is what he's trying to help each of us to see. It isn't something outside yourself that you're going to try to get. It is you are the will of God. And of course, being the will of God, you know where you are at all times. That's why that seraphim who walks beside you, if you can give him a little more leeway and say, hey, come. I mean, I'm constantly working with a seraphim. Walked into my house, didn't feel right. Things were really feeling terrible. And I said to my seraphim, entities, right? He said, right. I said, would you help me clean the house in the name of Jesus Christ? Let all be cleansed out of here. Bingo. They were gone. That peace that passes all understanding was there. The feeling of oneness was there. You're never alone. You are never, never alone. You always have this huge seraphim walking by your side. He can share with you when you open that door. He can cleanse you. He can walk through your being and clean everything. But we forget. If you want to know the will of God, be in the center of seraphim. Let him be in this, let him be here over you, as Mother talks about in the developing the cloud. She said, let the seraphim step in and you become the center of the seraphim. And when you become the center of the seraphim, you are the will of God. You have become at the center of God's will. This is a lesson. Now, I would like to apply this then to something that's happened this week when one of you requested assistance because you were under attack, spiritual attack, and even your computer and everything, nothing would work suddenly. Everything was a part of hell almost. And you were begging for some help. And the moment I heard the request, I heard the ring of the ring pass not. Now, if one would take a good look at this little technique, it's more than a little technique. The masters have given to us. K17 said, when you put the ring pass not around you, when you concentrate on that, it can be so powerful as to stop all diseases coming in. I've had to say over and over again, if I could just tell everybody with this disease that's been going around the world, the ring pass not, the ring pass not, it will stop diseases. But let me tell you what it can also do. When I was on the staff, we heard the stories coming out of Africa. Here, the church in Africa, miracle after miracle was happening. And one of those miracles was one of their leaders was also in the leadership of the government. He was a powerful man, spiritual, tremendous, illumined man. The government was overthrown. He and many others were thrown in prison. Probably was going to have to give his life. He sat day after day after day in prison, just repeated over and over again the heart, head, and hand decrees that he knew by heart. He worked with the heart, head, and hand decrees, and probably other decrees also. And the day came when suddenly they come in, and they took all of them out of the prison and lined them up to be shot. This man stood there, attuned with the Father, doing his decrees. The man in charge said, ready, aim, fire. Everybody dropped, but this man, shocked were the people, the soldiers, and so on. So he quickly said, ready, aim, and all of the guns were pointed at this one man. He still stood there. They did it a third time. Still stood there. The man in charge said, "What's going on? What do you have? What's going on here?" And he shared with him the Spirit, the truth, the light. Sometime later, the bishop had come to our conference, and I had a chance to sit down and talk to him. And I said, tell me about this experience. So he went through what I just shared with you. And I said, but what was he experiencing while this was going on? He said, his experience was like if you have aluminum foil dropped from an airplane and you have all these aluminum foils flashing the sun. He said this is what it looked like to him mentally as he stood there. And here was all of this light. The bullets came up to that point and dropped to the ground. A miracle. But this was the ring passed not. Now you can laugh at that if you want. I don't. I say, if you are in the will of God and you have this ability to develop this tremendous ring pass not that will stop even bullets. What else will it stop? Projections from other people. What else will it stop? It will stop all the negativity that wants to access yourself. The point is, we should be working with this day after day. As he built this ring pass not around him in prison, as he constantly were doing the heart, head, and hand decrees, he was building this tremendous energy around him. You don't do this just accidentally. You do this by practice until you have this thing tremendously strong. This is the will of God, the mastery that you and I can have if we actually become. You're married to you. There's no separation. You are the will of God. Moria, if you could only help us in this very moment to the very depths of our being, understand what you're saying. Help us to open that door to a greater and greater awareness of the will of God for our lives. And let us be so strong that we will not drop off sideways or take this path or that path because supposedly I am free. You're only free when you are in the will of this tremendous reality that God is. Let it be so that each of us in our own way become the very essence of the will of God every moment of every day and night. For we do ask it in the name Jesus Christ, in the name Moria El. Amen and amen.